Oh.
Hello, everyone. If you attend these webinars with any sort of regularity, I like to remind the audience from time to time that the special observations or holidays I feature in my intros are real. I don't make any of these up. So it is with a big smile that I note today is National Superhero Day. And why do I find that amusing? Because we are joined today by a superhero. Yes, really. Stick around and I'll explain. Today's home buyers want it all. They want clean energy encouraging solar. They want air freshening HVAC. They want environmentally clean all electric appliances. They want net zero. They want modern architecture. They want unique design, easy decision making, affordability. They want it all. But now, individually, none of these elements present a big challenge for home builders. Making them all work together, that can be a little difficult. The good news is that today's guests will talk through a problem-solving approach for complex challenges that enable one of our guests to provide some of the industry's highest performing, healthiest, cost-effective, and innovative homes, all while positioning his company as a formidable player in a highly competitive market. And who are we going to listen to today? Well, as you see on your screen, Sam Rashkin and Gene Myers. Sam Rashkin has recently retired from his position as the Chief Architect of the Building Technologies Office, the author of Retooling the U.S. Housing Industry, How It Got Here, Why It's Broken, and How to Fix It, in his forthcoming book, Housing 2.0. His latter book is the basis for the content in Green Builder Media's Housing 2.0 educational program. And Gene Myers is the CEO and founder of Thrive Home Builders, a six-time winner of the Department of Energy's Grand Award for Innovation, and the first production builder to deliver solar standard homes, build net zero communities, and use Colorado beetle kill lumber in the construction of its homes. Gene is Green Builder Media's 2021 Sustainability Superhero and is respected by so many of his peers we don't have time to count them all. One thing I can count is sponsors for this webinar, and we have three of them. The first one is Mitsubishi Electric. Mitsubishi Electric promotes sustainable building through the electrification of residential and commercial heating and cooling products. Their mission is to advance technologies that reduce waste output, promote sustainable resource cycles, while increasing energy efficiency and eliminating dependence on fossil fuels. Our next sponsor is PowerShift by NV Energy. It's a program that helps residential and business customers conserve energy and save money on their power bills. PowerShift is a one-stop resource to find energy-efficient products and services. For more information, please visit nvenergy.com/PowerShift. And last but not least, we have Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions. Panasonic is helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for home buyers. Now, I want to make sure that we hear from you. And here's the best way for that to happen. Simply use the questions box on the right side of your screen to send in your questions. I'll review those and pose them to Gene and Sam during the Q&A time set aside after their conversation. Gentlemen, take it away.
Wow, I get an hour to talk to one of my favorite people on the planet, Gene Myers. How you doing, Gene?
Me too. I'm great. How are you? It's great to be here. And you know what? I think we all sort of doze off when the sponsors are listed, but it's really great that we have people that support these things. And I've been involved with EVA, but none of that happens without sponsors. So I'm really grateful for the sponsors today, and I'm grateful for Green Builder Magazine calling me a superhero. Let me tell you what, I do not get up in the morning and put on a cape. I'm just like you are, just like our listeners are and our viewers, and I put my pants on one leg at a time. So, but it's great.
You're definitely here.
It's a great honor. I appreciate it.
Hey, great, Gene. Hey, I'd like to let people know kind of the arc of what I hope we can maybe dive in today. It's got such a treat to be able to get folks to hear your story and your perspectives. So what I want to do maybe is kind of just take a look at how we got here personally, your journeys. It's pioneering what you're doing, integrating performance and I think optimized design. So maybe some of your challenges, lessons learned. What do you think are the biggest rewards for being a high performance builder? I'm also curious what you think about some of the vision points I have about the industry, crisis points, faces, some of the opportunities that I see. And maybe end by looking to the future a little bit and get your perspective on where you see things going. And so that's a lot to cover in the next hour. And so why don't we begin with this point? I think we could all agree housing is not the easiest profession. What made you choose it? And what does success look like? When we go into something, we should have a view to what success looks like. It's something to shoot for. So I thought we'd start with an easy question.
Well, it is a tough business. And, I often will say I've got a lot of empathy for builders because to get started you're probably hawking everything you have and going out and getting loans and signing personally on construction loans and even worse on land. And so I have a lot of empathy for the difficulty and the challenge of getting into the business. And then what I've often told Sam is that it's really hard to keep the airplane in the air. Just the basic functions of good design. When I first got started, I thought, well, you're up the creek if you have bad design. And then you get that done, well, you're up the creek if you can't find the right subs. And then you're up the creek if you don't know how to sell and market it. And you begin to get this feeling that it's a chain and that any link in the chain that is weak can really derail the whole enterprise. And so that's what I think makes it challenging. And then my joke to Sam is, well, yeah, I'm trying to keep the airplane in the air and you want me to go do loop-de-loops with passenger support with it. He's Zero Energy Ready, or back when he was at Energy Star, and yet that's really what we're called to do. And I think that the way I've approached it has been just continuous improvement, a little bit of improvement every year. And if you've been at it for 30 years, well, you've had some opportunity to do some continuous improvement. And what does success look like? That's a really interesting question. And I've told young people in our company that for me, success is working on projects I believe in with people I like and respect. And the reason I say that is the economy is so harsh and cyclical that if you're measuring success by your bottom line, you're going to be disappointed at least half the time. And so, because there are just things outside of our control, whether it's interest rates or a recession or whatever, maybe a pandemic, but there are enough external factors that you better find a way to find joy in the journey and let that be your success. And then in our case, I think maybe it's verbalizing. Not sure where that is, Sam. In our case, maybe it's embodied in our purpose, which is to set a new standard for how home improves life. And I think success has to involve your customer. If you're going to be good at this, you really need to be customer centric. And that's the way we say it, is we want to improve people's lives who live in our homes. And we want our homes to improve the housing stock in neighborhoods and cities and towns where we build, to be an asset to the community rather than a liability. So that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, but it's a good one. I'm going to put a note here for the future. So with that in mind, maybe share with us, Gene, what's your journey? How did you get here? Of all the builders I know, I don't know if there's any regional builder who gets as much national attention, as many national awards, and even international focus by outside companies as your business in Denver, Colorado. What's your journey to how you got here? How'd that all work out for you? Because I know my life is pretty much an interesting set of choices and forks in the road. So how would you share that with us?
Well, it's the same as yours, where you kind of hit a fork in the road and you pick one. And I want Sam to talk about his journey, because he started off trying to be an architect. I started off trying to be a civil engineer. And I had clients who did subdivisions. And so we cranked out a lot of subdivision plats for builders. And I joked that somewhere in the 80s, I went to the dark side and started to work for one of our clients. But I think even starting before that, it's the why, and you talk a little bit about that and recommend Simon Sinek TED Talk. But yeah, I've always just wanted to make things better, and I know that's something that Sam and I both have in common when he shares the anecdote of walking on the beach with either Amanda or Monica and having her say, "Dad, why do you pick up all that trash?" But I joined the Peace Corps, and my really bad joke, a lot of people have heard it, is I joined the Peace Corps to save the world. It must have worked because we're still here. But that's kind of an idealism that I started with. And, I think there's still maybe a spark of idealism that we really can make it better. I've shared before that when I came back from the Peace Corps, it was a downer. I didn't change the world, and the world was a lot tougher than I thought. And then after the downer part of it starts to wear off, it's like, well, but what can you do? And I think that right there is the key juncture. And if you're a builder who is just, stamping out houses, you may be asking the question, well, but what can I do, in terms of housing affordability or carbon footprint or energy efficiency and health in the home, all of those things. And it's not what we can't do. I mean, you called it. We build a couple of hundred homes a year. We're not going to change the world, but we can, I call it bloom where you're planted, where I'm a builder. I'm in Denver, Colorado. Well, then what can we do? Well, we can build the best houses that we know how to build in our hometown. And so I think that's been the driver, and the driver for continuous improvement is there's always something to work on, something to get better. And maybe it's that continuous improvement piece that over the years starts to be cumulative in a way that people notice. And I think maybe that's why we have an outsized reputation for the size builder we are. We've had a lot of help along the way too. We've had great manufacturer partners, and I can't begin to tell you how important I believe our partnership with your programs has been over the years, whether it was Energy Star. We were a pretty bad builder when we joined Energy Star. We didn't know it, but we were a pretty bad builder when we joined Energy Star. And it used to be, you just wait, I wonder what version 2 is going to look like. I wonder what version 3 is going to look like. Okay, version 2.1, what's that going to look like? And that was that Sam on the same journey of continuous improvement, trying to grow the program and make sure that it remained relevant as the building science evolved and as what we could accomplish within the realm of affordability and reality changed. And then, Sam goes and leaves this amazing position that he had with a huge run of successes because of the same thing. Well, what else needs to be done? And I think we share a lot in common with our motivations and why we do what we do. And I think there's also the element of humility that we never arrive.
Never will.
There's always something else that ought to be done, that can be done. And I think one of the most satisfying things for me is that we have a group of people now that they get stuff done. And I've never had that. We have, we decide we want to go tackle decarbonization. It's not like, what are you talking about? It's like, okay, how are we going to do that? And then they go get it done. And it's really pretty incredible. But I don't know if that helped about the journey. I started off. engineer, went to work for a developer, ended up with a bunch of lots in the savings and loan crisis, and we thought the only way out of these lots was to put houses on them. So we became a builder, and then one thing led to another.
You know, Gina, if I could just share a few points of my journey. I think what's most remarkable to me is these amazing pivot points that happen, and how somehow I find the inner voice kind of always is steering you in a certain direction. And if you're not like completely externally connected to your why, I think at least internally there's, you know, you are to the point that you get all sorts of signals if you listen to your, you know, to your instincts. And so, you know, as a kid growing up, you know, I was always focused on housing and being an architect. I don't know why. And but I got a scholarship to a University of New York system. And so I didn't want to give away a free ride for 2 years to college and go to the architectural schools that were not in the New York system. So the only program available for me was engineering. And I say that because when I finally had to transfer to architectural school after 2 years, there's only one program that would give me a 3-year pathway to finish the 5-year program that's normally for architecture. That was Syracuse. But you crammed everything in 3 years. It wasn't to that last year, the last semester, I got like an elective course, and I took, for some reason in the 70s, a course on energy efficient buildings and solar. And that one little course just embedded in me this kind of, you know, passion for how buildings could be better. Even though back then, you know, I think gasoline was like 28 cents a gallon. It was some crazy low number. So energy was cheap, but it made sense not to waste. You know, fast forward, and you know, I back in California, when I couldn't do architecture that was strictly based on energy, I decided to work in energy programs. And to make ends meet, I moonlighted as an architect doing energy efficient residential. And because I did that, I got the call from EPA to do Energy Star. It was a combination of being an architect and the program work at Energy Commission that got me that call. And the instinct to just help Sue out, my wife, so she could stay home with the kids and moonlight, do 2 jobs, that led to that. And you know, it was just not obvious to move from California. But again, it's always these instincts, this kind of anchored to your core that kind of, I think, always led to the right decisions. So when I look at my path, it was really funny how I kind of evolved that way. And then, like you said, I think once Energy Star was established, I really wanted to be involved in programs that would represent the kind of house I would design or build as an architect or builder. So, you know, the journey is always tied to these serendipity moments, to a little bit of luck, to a little bit of having some instincts to follow a certain lane. So, you know, that's for me how it really is interesting. And I hear these parallels in your path. You know, you're always involved in the technical side, the engineering side, and had this awesome passion to do more and do better. So I think our backgrounds always fascinate me. So you get there.
Sam, we're both children of the 70s, I think. And
yeah.
So for those of you who aren't ancient like we are, it was a really kind of an awakening where the baby boomer generation was in college, and we were all very idealistic. And I remember the term socially relevant was something that people talked about, at least at the University of Denver campus where I went. And I really was slightly disappointed in myself that, well, how socially relevant is being a civil engineer? And then I went to Honduras in the Peace Corps, and they didn't have a road to their richest agricultural valley. And you begin to realize, oh, wait a minute, perhaps I was mistaken about that. And then what is really socially relevant about being a home builder? Well, today, home builders can actually have a significant role in decarbonization. Home builders can have a significant role in the health of the people who live in their homes. home builders can have a significant role in the cost of operating a home for our customers, and the impact, the environmental impact that both the ongoing operation of our homes and the initial construction of our homes have. And you know, it's interesting. Sam sucked me into this thing many years ago called the Race to Zero. It's now called the Solar Decathlon Design Challenge. And I just can't, yeah, I kind of missed that first name. And I just finished judging, like weeks of work judging the this last Solar Decathlon. And these technological students today get the fact that what they do matters to the world. And I didn't really see that when I graduated, but it is so empowering and inspiring to see. I think they had 62 universities sign up this year. And in my group for attached housing, we had 10, one from India, one from Canada, one from Australia, the rest from the US, Cal Poly, I mean, like some really serious places. And then lo and behold, little Maryville University in Scranton, Pennsylvania takes the cake in our category because they got how to connect the dots between the technology and how to really change that place. So there's a lot that we can do as builders. We're not a sideline industry. We're a major economic force in the country. When they want to fix a recession, they lower interest rates because our industry is such a powerhouse that ripples throughout the economy. And we really can and do make a difference.
You know, it's funny how Race to Zero actually came about. Again, serendipity, instincts, and everything else. When I got to the Department of Energy, my first job, like any first job, is inventory all the assets and liabilities and get a sense of what you have to work with. And I found a Building America contract with the Housing Innovation Research Lab. It was the NHV Research Center. And every year we were spending a few $100,000 to do a Energy Value in Housing Award. And I said, you know, I could do an award program for free with Zero Energy Ready Home that would basically be completely duplicative of that award program. And I really said, why don't we just repurpose this and make it a student competition instead of a builder competition, and really fill in the gap that the full Solar Decathlon leaves, because it's a 2-year program, incredibly expensive for students to get resources just to participate. You got to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. You got to suck up 2 years of real estate in your curriculum. So Race to Zero just became in existence only because you could find a few $100,000 and repurpose it as a contract. And now it's the dominant form of the Solar Decathlon in a way that gets to more students than the other program ever could. And yeah, that was just an amazing good fortune. I mean, that event.
Well, I have a Sam story about that.
Oh, sure.
So I might have only been on the EBA board a year or two, and we were having a board meeting concurrent with ResNet down in Scottsdale. And we had this board meeting, and Sam came in, and he was sick as a dog. You remember? I mean,
yeah,
he was
really
very ill. Like today, we would all rush to put our masks on if we were around him. And he came in and he started drawing on this whiteboard, and he had a slide deck, and it was all about, I'm going to get building science into the curricula of higher education. And I thought, he's delirious, because, you know, I went and talked to the CSU president one time and just said, why can't we get any teaching at CSU about HERS scores and raters and energy performance and building science? And the president said, well, you must think I have a lot more power than I do. I mean, in order to get anything into a curriculum, it's an act of God, and you got to have some champions on your faculty to take it. And I got like nowhere. And Sam comes in and says, yeah, well, I'm going to do this. And I thought he was nuts. And lo and behold, 62 colleges and universities show up because of Sam's idea, it's affecting hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of students all across the world. It's so respected internationally that, you know, we get, last year, we had a team from China, and they were like presenting at 2 in the morning, you know, their time, in order to do a live presentation on Zoom. And all of this is because Sam had an idea about how could we really make a change. And by the way, you know, I think this is like not even in his job description. He's just out there dreaming up these things that can make it better. And it's one of the great gifts that Sam has given to the industry and to the country for his creativity. And then, you know, I was talking with him one time at the beginning of the prior presidential election. I said, what do you think, or presidential term, and what do you think is going to happen? He said, oh, it's all going to be all right. I said, well, how do you know? He said, because I'm budget dust. I have like no money, so nobody really cares what I do. And he, instead of lamenting, I need more funding, I've got all these constraints, he turned it to an advantage, and like, let's just go do what we think needs to be done and be creative. And I mean, that's an amazing public service that Sam has given to the country. And
you're too kind. You're too kind.
I'm not too kind. I just happen to have been on the sidelines to actually know what actually happened, and it's really amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. No one was paying attention, and I didn't have a job description when I got there, so it was the best job you could ever imagine. But you know, getting back to this whole journey point we've been discussing, you know, somehow you did find religion, and you looked at getting better, and you saw high performance as a really valuable tool to differentiate your company. Originally Newtown, and then of course the transition to Thrive Home Builders. And so I'm curious, you know, as we speak to other builders out there, what would you see the biggest challenges to getting there, to getting to be high performance? Like I say, it's a step at a time, but anything particular that was really the hardest?
Well, you've heard me talk about how first you have to win the hearts and minds of your own people. And I used to have this saying that the purchasing department was where all good ideas go to die. You know, and so pre-Great Recession, I just had this. I was so frustrated. It seemed like I could see where we needed to go, but we just couldn't get there. And I felt like I was beating my head against the wall. And I thought, you know, I just need to populate the company with believers. I can't carry the vision of the company forward alone because I need help. I can't do it alone. And we would seem like we'd start off on all these initiatives and they would just fizzle. And it got to the point where I think every time Gene came up with a new initiative, it was a real eye roller in the company. Oh, great. You know, here's what we're going to do. And it's never really going to happen. And so at that time, I thought, well, I need to just be tougher on people, that you're either on board or you're over. And that, I don't recommend that. That was a bad idea. And then the recession hit and it like reset everything. I mean, we went, I guess, from 60 or 70 people down to 13.
Wow.
And in our market, we lost 80% of the builders. And and not coincidentally, we lost 80% of the housing starts in our market. And that's a pretty drastic correction. And so who did I end up with? I ended up with 13 really committed people, and, by accident.
It was a forced filter to the most community.
It was a forced screening. And before I used to think, well, the only way I can nurture ideas for innovation is to set them aside in kind of a special projects group. And that didn't work because everybody who wasn't in the special project group kind of resented the people who were. It didn't work. And so coming out of it, I thought, we're not going to have a special projects group. We're going to innovate within the mainstream of the company. And we're going to innovate with the people in the departments, and we're going to be multidisciplinary, and it's not a special project, it's going to be who we are. And I didn't know it at the time, but I think that was a pretty critical turning point. And so then you start. I remember the first time you gave us a grand award for housing innovation. I think it was in 2013. Just so you know, there was a government shutdown at the time, and Sam wasn't allowed to be quoted or to really be present, but he was there.
I was there.
I think he might have gone on his own
rules. I showed up.
He might have gone on his own United miles or whatever his miles were, but he was there. And we were in this hangar out at some former air base or airport or something in California. The wind was blowing like crazy.
If you remember, Gene, it was the hangar at this, like you say, it was a former airfield that was being used concurrently for the solo decathlon.
Right.
We moved to California that year.
Yeah, the solar decathlon was built out on old runways.
In the middle of a highway, right? It was the worst location ever.
Yeah. But what was really interesting about it was we began to see that maybe we were doing something special. I had no idea. You know, we're just sort of in our rut and just trying to do the right thing. And these really good people, this core group, got us this first grand award for housing innovation. I think we've won 11 now. And I remember in my acceptance speech, I mean, obviously this made a big impact on me, but I looked right at Sam and I said, you know, everybody on the stage really needed to be congratulated because despite the recession, none of us ever stopped investing in our products and trying to get better. And that's where I met Mandalay Homes, and they've ended up being another stalwart of the Zero Energy Ready Home program and others. And so really we flourish in this framework of Sam's programs. And we got to find builders that we didn't know existed that thought like we did. And we became in relationship with these builders that we had something in common with, that were important things in common. And sometimes formally in the groups that Sam would pull together before the EBA conference or whatever, or sometimes informally. It's a phone call to Jeff Farrell or a phone call to Todd Usher or any of the builders. With a phone call to Mr. Carl Franklin. Oh wait, I don't think there is a Carl Franklin. But we had such great friendships and relationships that it really it became something that I preach, and that is don't go it alone.
It's almost the basis for the EBA benchmark group.
That's right, and it is so difficult and lonely to try to do this by yourself. And so to get into a program where you have the technical support, but you also have the moral support. I remember Sam coming up to me after, I think I might have complained at that, in that hangar that we were getting comfort complaints from Energy Star version 3.1. And he said, Gene, you know that if you ever have a problem, you just call me and we'll get the lab on it. We'll get one of the national labs to figure it out with you. And I'm like, how does a little builder like us tap into the knowledge base of a national laboratory? Well, it's through these programs and the relationships. And I'll tell you this, if you join in those programs and you have a problem, the programs are so vested in your success that it's so important, I think, to plug in and take advantage of the history and the marketing resources and the wisdom, and not to mention the building science resources. And Sam created that culture within the programs that was builder centric. And we'd been in programs before. We'd been in utility programs, utility energy efficiency programs. And they were really about promoting their utility. They weren't really about being builder centric. And I remember when Sam made the leap over to DOE, we had a meeting in Denver with a bunch of builders who, I guess we were Energy Star builders, I don't know, at the time. And Sam he was there to ask the builders, what should we do with this program? And one of the first things we said is, name it a name that describes what it is. Because at the time it was called the DOE Challenge Home Program. And we just had labels flying all over the place and on our sales floor with energy or environments for living and Energy Star. And Colorado had a built green and a green built. And I mean, it was just very confusing. And I remember CR Hero just leaning back and saying, call it the DOE Zero Energy Ready Home Program. And what happened from that? Well, 6 months later, that name was changed. It was a new logo. Sam listened to builders and valued the challenges we were facing. And I think that culture of being builder centric is so steeped into the program with Joe Nebbia and all of the people that are still involved.
Jamie,
all you have to do is call. All you have to do is call, and you get heard and you get help.
So Gene, a quick little anecdote about that story. I hated the name, the DOE Challenge Home. The day I got there, it was just dumped on my lap with that name. And so I went all the way to the top to deputy secretary, and there was no consideration. It was verboten to have zero in the name. There was some policy reason or some fear of overpromising. I don't know what it was, but from the deputy secretary level, we were told you could not use zero. So we had to go out at first with the Challenge Home named. So lo and behold, I meet with you guys. We have our builder roundtable meeting, and the single largest point of agreement is that we need to change the name. And I documented that meeting. I put it into all the notes, and I took it back to the deputy secretary. They said, what am I going to do? The builders hate this name. And we hit them at a weak point when I think they were softening on the word zero, and we got it changed. But because you guys stepped up and gave us ammunition and you gave us the voice of the customer preference, we just used that for all it was worth to get the name changed. I think within a very short time, like you said, we were able to do it. But had you guys not done that, I was getting rejected every time we went to them wanting to change the name. The Challenge Home was a horrible name. So the other thing I want to mention, you raise a really important point about builders on that podium getting recognized for the Housing Innovation Award were pretty prominent in their survival during the horrible recession. And just as a data point, the Energy Star program had, right before the recession, moved up to about 9.5% market penetration of all the homes built in the nation. After the recession, it jumped to 24.5%. Our numbers went down a little, but our market penetration went up, which really speaks to the resilience of the high performance builders. So your kind of small group was representative of this larger kind of dynamic that high performance seemed to make builders resilient. So I thought that was interesting.
And I'll often say that the greatest risk of all is to be just like every other builder. And
if you just what?
Be just like every other builder. And the reason for that, I've been next door in master plan communities to really big national builders. And if you hit the recession, some boardroom decision, and at the time Detroit for Pulte or Dallas for D.R. Horton, they can make a boardroom decision and cut prices 30% just to move product, and you're left high and dry. So we were in a big master plan community in the former Stapleton Airport with a whole bunch of big national builders during the recession, and they were giving $50,000 incentives to just move a house. And so the buyers were conditioned. They'd walk into your sales office and say, well, how much will you give me? And so we decided, as an Energy Star builder at that time, let's give them solar. Let's give them something they can't get anywhere else. And let's get them something that reinforces that how different we are from those other guys. And I think that point of differentiation is one of the reasons that we made it when 80% of our peers did not. And so when I talk to builders who are thinking about getting on the high performance path or going to the next level, it's like it has to start, I think, with the values that we want to make it better, we want to do the right thing. But it also is a very important strategy as a business model that we're not like those guys. And so when the worm turns and they start discounting, you have a powerful set of tools in your toolbox that they do not have. And I'm not saying that the majority of the market will pay more for what we do, but there are a lot more of them than we've been able to serve. And so I feel so much more confident that we have a resilient business because of it.
If I could share a personal kind of add-on to that, that was true, I think, so much because you did everything else so well. Your designs were great. Your sales process was really strong, always got stronger as it went along. I think attention to quality, and I think you had a great product. And so your ability to add something unique on top of a great product, I think, was really the secret sauce that kind of worked so well for you.
Well, I think it's the whole point of Sam's book. He might have, was that intentional? We can rehearse this, but here's the thing. For most of my career, our energy efficiency has been a tiebreaker with other builders.
Yeah.
And if you lose that customer on bad models or bad decorating or terrible marketing, it is so competitive that the table stakes are you have to be good at everything, and then you have to layer on high performance. And it's back to that chain that I was talking about with the first question, where there are so many ways that you can really derail a customer's buying decision. And so I think you're exactly right. And I think that's why Sam had, you mentioned the little voice in his head. That little voice in his head was telling him that maybe it's time to shift gears and start to address everything else that is really necessary to make a high performance builder succeed. And I think that's what Housing 2.0 is.
Well, it's trying to be, and again, it was based on being able to observe some of the great examples like yourself and a number of other builders out there, I think, that get at enough of it to empirically show, I think, that business model is pretty compelling. But I want to make sure we leave some time to look forward a little bit. And like you say, this is a never-ending journey. You just keep trying to get better and better. So how do you see the future? What are the biggest challenges and opportunities ahead that you think are out there? And you got to keep staying ahead of the big builders, because and you can do it in a way often they can't. You're more nimble. You have less structure, organizational structure to fight. So how do you see the future?
Well, I think let's look back to the recent past before that. First of all, Sam, here, have some water. But we were ready for the pandemic. We didn't know we had prepared for the pandemic. We had really launched Health in the Home back in 2013. And we were ready, and not very many builders were. And so now they're very aware of how important health is to our customer base. And so how do we stay ahead? And that's what Sam was saying, is we always have to be looking at the next thing. The huge challenges are housing affordability and decarbonization, in my view, where from a housing affordability standpoint, our median price in Denver is now $600,000 for a new build.
How much?
It's $600,000. And when I first started, $600,000 was a custom home in the trees, and so it grieves me that everyday people are going to be priced out of our market. And I think it's been the case in California and other high cost markets for a long time. And so a lot of what Sam's focusing on Housing 2.0 is there a better delivery system that can pull costs out? So we're working in that direction in systems building to try to address affordability. And then I think just this last week, with all of the press on President Biden's climate action goals and decarbonization goals, I don't have a life, so I watch a lot of documentaries, and I can't stand watching the coral reef documentaries, and I can't stand watching the glaciers, and they're just, if you're really with it and understanding what's happening on the planet, you're back to that question that we talked about earlier. Well, what could I do about it? I mean, it's a huge problem. What could I do about it? Well, we could electrify our homes in a way that, at least from an operation standpoint, we're pulling fossil fuels out of the equation. And then we could move towards calculating the embodied carbon within our homes. And so I'm not sure this has been announced. There are only 42 people here. I don't think we're going to spill the secret, but we're partnering with Green Builder Magazine to build a home where we calculate the embodied carbon in a very, not the one-click software that some of the students in the solar decathlon used, but to really, in an academically honest way, calculate the embodied carbon in our homes. And, I think everybody's saying, wow, the president has some pretty lofty goals. Denver has even more lofty goals: net zero energy on all homes built in Denver by 2024. And so we're just really focused on moving forward in that realm. And what's the customer value proposition for decarbonization in their home? It's not quite like energy efficiency, where you can show them the monthly energy savings. But I do think that if it's going to become table stakes, where we're going to have to be able to do this in order for our 20% contribution, more or less, to the whole carbon load in America, the buildings do that. It's a significant chunk, and we have a significant role to play. So we're going to dip our toe in that.
Gene, do you think I'm crazy though? I'm personally struggling with this idea of calculating carbon, because it's just one more metric and one more score. And I think we're putting too much at the consumer. At the end of the day, I think we can keep carbon pretty simple. If you can keep concrete, steel, and extruded polystyrene out of the building, that's your 80–90% solution. You've done the job. You're down to almost 10 or 15, 20% carbon. Can we make it that simple? Can we sell buildings without the really nasty foams? with almost no steel and with at minimal to no concrete. Things like SIP foundations or even precast concrete foundations, say 70% of the concrete just right there and give you a better foundation. So I wonder, by scoring, if we make it too complicated. So we just do those three things: keep bad foam out, keep the concrete down to maybe 25% of what was normally in buildings, and get rid of steel, and call it a win.
Well, I think that's probably the way the national policy should go, because simpler is better. We're launching this in a college town. Colorado State University dominates Fort Collins, Colorado, where we're going to be doing this. We think that our market will care about it. I don't know. We'll find out if it has resonance with anybody else. But
it can just be that badge of honor that costs you nothing. It won't cost you.
I asked the question of the experts. Am I talking thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of dollars to do this? Hundreds.
Yes.
And so it becomes like almost a free badge of honor. And Fort Collins has a carbon neutrality goal of 2050. Well, they don't have a single building project that has ever gotten there. How are they going to do that between now and 2050? And I think they're going to value it. And so here's what happens when we build housing stock that meets the goals of the community where we live. We get more opportunity. We'll get a call from the city. Well, have you seen this project? You might want to take a look at this project, because they want your housing stock in their city long term. And that's happened to us over the years, over and over, where we get opportunities no one else even sees. And in such a competitive land market, land is actually the lifeblood of a builder. It's the basic. If you don't have a place to build it, you don't get to build it. And so it's been a huge advantage, and we think it'll be a way to stay ahead.
So Gene, if you also, I believe, count infrastructure costs, it can truly be negative. Because if you're an all-electric home, and I'm not running the gas infrastructure, all the piping and meters and everything else to get gas to all the homes in a development or subdivision, that's a huge cost savings, perhaps, just not worrying about that infrastructure.
I think the city of Denver, so they're very aggressive, and the city of Denver has calculated that cost at $6,000 to $8,000 a house.
Exactly.
Now, where we have a bone to pick with it is that's the saving for the developer. For the home builder, it's only like a few $100. But when you look at look at it holistically, I think that's true. That's real money in an affordability challenge market.
That's great. Hey, we're coming up on 5 minutes left, and I'm trying to think, what should I do with you, just to leave everyone with a, just some real insight about how special you are. And I'm thinking maybe you can there's two things I think that I'd like you to just discuss in the last few minutes. One is we've been through just an amazing time. Our nation's lost 560,000 lives to COVID. Everyone's had to virtually completely reinvent themselves in terms of personal lives and business lives. So what do you think is going to persist as changes as we come out of COVID over the next 8 to 12 months, maybe a little bit longer? And maybe one more thing I'd like you to speak to is, I always say leadership is everything. If I have to pick a place to work or a business to engage with and want to work with, I always start with the leadership and the culture that leadership brings to the table. So maybe you can speak to those 2 points in a few minutes that are left. Just what stays and what doesn't stay with all the changes we've instituted with COVID, and how does leadership make all this possible? So,
well, thanks for giving me like 4 minutes to talk about those. Those are pretty big topics. But I think the emphasis on health is not going to go away, and it's the pandemic, but it's also a huge aging boomer population that is more and more focused on, I'm going to die if I don't take care of myself. And so I think the customer's focus on health is going to remain. And oh, by the way, pulling a gas fireplace and a gas range out of a person's house actually has a health benefit. And that may be the marketing approach to decarbonization, where we are delivering value to the customer because of that. And my favorite indoor air quality expert, Brett Singer, was in my house and smoking up the house with a wok, and we looked at all of the indoor air quality sensors around. And folks, this is real and important. So we're going to continue to focus on that. That's not going away. And will masks go away? Maybe. I'm sick of masks, but I think the focus on health remains. And then leadership, I think that.
One quick thing, paperless sales, do you think that will stick or not?
That will stick. Something that may stick for us is you get into model homes by appointment. And we did that right after the lockdown, and our customers love it because there's no interruption going on when they're signing a contract. Our salespeople love it for the same reason. And you know, you'll get a customer to share their financial challenges with you that they might not be willing to do if there's another family lurking outside the sales office door. So we're pondering appointments only for viewing models, except for maybe an open house night once or twice a week, where after hours the customer could really come in and kick the tires. But we have them all paperless, and they'll stay.
What about virtual walkthroughs?
Virtual walkthroughs are very important and will continue. It's one of the reasons we think we can say we'll just we'll show the physical houses by appointment only, because they can sit there on their computer and do a virtual tour of our homes. And they're getting better, you know, even over the course of this last year, the quality of those virtual walkthroughs has gotten a lot better. And then leadership, I think the key is, if I could say one thing, I mentioned that I think a real key for us has been to populate our company with believers. And it hit me post-recession how hypocritical that can be if you haven't built a company worth believing in.
Yeah.
And it's really incumbent upon leadership to be sure that the company is worth believing in, and that's how you attract believers. And so who can't get excited about setting a new standard for how home improves life? Who can't get excited about a mantra of always do the right thing? All of these, I call them fluffy things, but our values are so critical to inspiring fellowship. And I think that may be the most fundamental lesson in leadership that I've learned.
You know, on that point, I'm going to have to call it. It's 3 o'clock and Eastern time. It's 1 o'clock your time. I think I can go all day with you, which is a real frustration. I can kill a whole day just.
Yeah, we're losing people, Sam. So I think it may be time.
But thanks, Gene. You're great. I love always learn stuff from you every time. Thanks for starting off our Thought Leader series. Couldn't have picked a better person to do it.
Thanks, Sam. It's always a pleasure.
You bet.
All right, gentlemen, we do have a couple of questions. I know, Sam, you got to run. So thank you for joining us today. We do have a couple of questions from the audience, and Gene, I think you'll be able to handle these if you're okay with that.
Happy to do it.
All right, adios, Sam. All right, and by the way, I'm going to put this in the chat box so that people know they can send in their questions now. So please do so. Give me a second here. Okay. All right. First question comes in from Brian. Brian is living up in Northeast Iowa. And he says, not only are contractors impossible to find, but if you do, they're not pushing newer technology like heat pumps or ICFs. And it's gotten to the point where he's considering basically doing a DIY project on installing like a Mr. Cool type heat pump or using ICFs due to lumber prices and no contractor availability. So Gene, how would you recommend someone build an affordable net zero type house in a climate like Northern Iowa, which in some regards can be similar to Denver, in that, you know, you both do get cold, you both do get a summer as well.
You know, I just had a conversation about this. So has anybody heard the name Sarah Betterman before? But Sarah, who it might be Mike Foss, sent me a kind of a consumer question that was very similar. And I actually talked to these people. They were in Castle Rock, Colorado, and contemplating a DIY project. And the advice I had for them was build it out of Home Depot. A lot of times we'll kind of fall in love with a system. And I'm not, by the way, there's nothing wrong at all with ICFs, but you can build a net zero home out of Home Depot. And simpler is better, especially if you're trying to execute it yourself. Also, what we started being able to do in Denver, this is fairly recent, but we've been able to actually use air source heat pumps that don't need a gas backup. They're good for, 15, 20 below zero. And so that is so simple, no ground loop, no, the install on that is very conventional, and you don't have to go to some weird, crazy brand of equipment either. Mitsubishi has one of the best. Over the years, we've used a Carrier Green Speed. So if you're in a similar climate zone to Denver, keep it simple. Buy things that are off-the-shelf solutions and just put them together really well. We use a double 2x4 wall, and we've been kind of criticized for it sometimes. And in a high lumber cost environment, it might not be the smartest move in the world, but our subcontractors have the capacity to execute on that. Where if we go with 6 inches of exterior foam, our subs I don't have the confidence that they can properly flash and execute on that. So my advice is keep it as simple as possible. Use materials that are off the shelf and just put them together in a way that gets you where you want to go.
Okay. We also have a question from Lindsay. You mentioned that net zero energy requirements are coming soon to Denver. She wanted to know if you're interested in building homes to something like the passive house standard.
Well, I might have been the only production builder ever certified as a passive house consultant. And I must say that it might be the most thorough building science education I ever received. I wasn't lucky enough to be born young enough to go through the solar decathlon. They know more in their little finger now about building science than I did when I was 50. But I went through the passive house consultant certification and learned a ton. But what I also learned was that in order to get to those standards, these are not off the shelf. It's very expensive to buy a passive house window. It's difficult to get there. And so I was faced with a dilemma after I'd kind of gotten my certificate, and now what am I going to do? And we concluded that for our customers, for the value proposition, if it was cheaper to add a solar panel to the roof than it was to go a step further on the envelope, that we should put the extra solar panel on the roof. So where do you stop? I'm not sure what a passive house is with no solar, but it's probably a Hearst floor in the 15 or 20 range. We feel that the sweet spot is to get to a Hearst floor in the 40-ish range and then put solar on to take it the rest of the way. that ends up being the most cost-effective way to get to zero.
Gene, I wanted to bring up something that you and I have talked about before, but more privately, and I'd like to bring the rest of the group into that, and that is, you mentioned that land is the lifeblood of the builder. Can you talk about the effect that water is having on your company?
Well, so Mike knows the dirty secret that we put a piece of land under contract for about 500 units in Fort Collins, got all the way through entitlements, and could not find the water rights at a reasonable price to execute on that project. And we had to walk at that point. It was a notable failure of mine, but we failed forward. We learned about the importance of water, and we've been able to do what I think is a pretty remarkable recovery up there with a 220 unit development that we're doing. And so there are places in the West, and Northern Colorado is one of them, where it's almost like you need to go buy the water first and then go find the land where that water can be transferred. And, you know, I have a good friend who's the head of sustainability for KB Home, Jacob Atala. He's from Jordan. And I remember we were talking about energy, and he said, you know, the long game is water. That it's going to be the limiting resource for people. And someday the wars will be fought not over oil, but over water in the Middle East. And, you know, none of us can foresee the future. I'm sure Jake would admit to that, but it does underscore how critical it is. I mean, you start with Maslow's basic needs, and there's water and shelter and air. Those are all of the fundamentals of beginning to build a community. And it's just getting cost prohibitive to bring water to a project in Northern Colorado. So what Mike and I were talking about was water conservation. What could we do? So far, we don't have a national goal of water conservation. And we don't have a state building code in Colorado that would push people to water conservation. But in Sam's wisdom, when he crafted the Zero Energy Ready Home program, he incorporated the indoor water conservation features of EPA WaterSense. And so we've been building to those standards for a long time. And I think that's going to become more and more critical.
All right, I wanted to ask you a final question here, Gene. The question was asked, you know, self-sustainable buildings, you know, a building that houses people and is providing all the basic necessities of the residents, like, you know, so it's not just net zero water, it's not just net zero energy, but it's self-producing food as well. Is this actually possible?
Well, you know, I think we're at a point in time when it is possible, but you know what? That takes a lot of occupant behavior. That takes an occupant who's really willing to go grow their own food. And we are involved in the very early stages of a big project, again, up in Fort Collins, that kind of has what the development world is crudely entitled agriburbia, which I bet there's a better name for that. But I think there is a lot more focus on food purity and food availability. And I think it will play an important role going forward. But I do think it requires an occupant that is really bought into that and will actually carry on long after the sale of the home. You know, I've often thought about what do we do, and we build homes, but we sort of pre-wire our neighborhood for the capacity to go where the occupants want to take it. The community is actually the occupants, it's not our homes. And I think as we have more and more awareness that people want to go those directions, we want our homes to facilitate that, not to make it impossible for people to do it. And more we're finding alignment with land developers who are willing to do the same thing, where to reserve agricultural land as a part of a master plan community, to incorporate community gardens, to really start to look at the holistically the well-being of a community of people. And so I think that's happening. I do think it's possible. And we want to be there on the front lines of that and doing our part by pre-wiring these neighborhoods with great homes.
You know, I do have one more question for you, and it was something that you said in your answer there that sparked it in my mind. You said occupant behavior and how a lot of that will depend on occupant behavior. So my question to you is not so much on the food side. Let's talk about whether it's net zero energy or net zero water, but the operation of the building to be able to have it continue to run in a net zero fashion. What is it that Thrive Home Builders is doing in regards to maintenance? Because you have occupants who are in these buildings and they have a number of systems, because you need a number of systems in order to have some of these capabilities as a home. What do you see? I mean, do you see it as the elephant in the room of people who, you know, hey, look, you got to maintain some of this stuff, or at least they get reminders or something, because some of these systems, if they break down, now they're not the net zero that they were hoping to have. And it's not really the home builder's fault. It's just more of their expectations are, you know, they're upset a little bit. You obviously don't want bad word of mouth. So talk to me a little bit about what you see in your visionary mind on this topic of maintenance.
Well, I think you're teeing me up on that because we are working on that. And now where it started for me, we were right before the shutdown. One of my coworkers, Bill Rectanis, and I were sitting in an audience at the resident conference down in Scottsdale, and people from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and Pacific Northwest National Lab presented preliminary findings on a study where they went back into high performance homes and documented how's it doing on air quality, how's it doing on energy efficiency. And the answer was not good. And I remember turning to Bill and saying, we either need to figure out how to make sure that our customers are getting value for these really expensive mechanical rooms that they're buying, or we need to dumb it down and go back to the Panasonic Whisper Green fan, which is the exhaust ventilation strategy that the programs like. And so we started, that was about a year ago, and a little over a year ago. And so we started thinking hard about how do we step in and actually provide a service to our customers long after the sale. And we have an observation about the industry that home builders can't wait to get rid of their customers. They want to close the house, they want to get them out of warranty and move on. And you know, what would it be like if we really took seriously the prospect of having customers for life? And so we have launched a company. It's called Dwell Home Maintenance here in Denver. We found a champion, someone who is just really passionate about this, Joe Himmelgarn. And we are pulling together the software necessary to properly, how about this, to properly manage all the manufacturer warranties on every piece of equipment that's put into the house. To have what we're basically calling for now a blue box. Our logo is Thrive Home Builders. You can almost see it there. There's one right over my shoulder. It's blue, Thrive Blue. But a blue box shows up every year after Christmas, and it's all of the filters you'll ever need for the year. And then someone from Thrive, if it's still under warranty, or someone from Dwell Home Maintenance comes in twice a year, does any maintenance, any scheduled maintenance on the equipment in the home, replaces filters, and just looks around. One of the things that we're also investigating is to be able to actively monitor air quality, energy usage, water usage, just so if there's a water break, we know about it. If the home isn't performing properly, we can be proactive about contacting the owner and saying, we need to take a look at your air handler. There's something going on here that isn't quite right. And so we're going down that road. And I think it is a kind of a blind spot for the industry that our customers are going to live in these homes for decades. And we need to, as I was talking about pre-wiring for neighborhood, we need to pre-wire our customer behavior in a way that these homes can really perform to the max for as long as possible.
That's a very forward-thinking approach to take, and my hope is that other builders will follow in your footsteps, like they already have on numerous other things, Gene. But certainly on that as well, because I agree. I think that is, like you said, a blind spot that can really hamper our collective ability to not just create some of these net zero homes, but to continue to have net zero homes. So I don't see any other questions. So I want to thank both you and Sam, who had to depart, for sharing their time and knowledge with us today. And thank you to our audience for attending and asking great questions. Finally, thank you to Mitsubishi Electric.
Thanks, Mike, for being the MC. And one more time, a shout out to Green Builder Magazine for the Sustainability Superhero Award. And I'm really grateful for the relationship that we've been able to have with Green Builder Media. And thank you for all you've done to really help our business and our cause. And it's great to see you again, Mike.
Always good to see you, sir. And thank you for all that you do. We got to see each other last week at the symposium. We're seeing each other again today. And I will probably see you at an upcoming Housing 2.0 series, I believe. But yes, thank you also to Mitsubishi Electric, Power Shift by NV Energy, and Panasonic for their generous sponsorship of this webinar. Our next webinar is going to take place on Wednesday, May 12th. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern, just like we normally start. We're going to be talking about healthy homes and about how location can affect disease, illness, and wellness. Hope you'll join us once again. And finally, before we meet again, Mother's Day will occur on Sunday, May the 9th. So don't forget your mothers or your grandmothers or your spouses or fairy godmothers, whoever. We'll see you all back here in a couple of weeks. Take care, everyone.